Hello there, it's Raven, and I'm back with episode, I think, 3 of the School of Design, and today we're going to cover vertical ships. Now, these are ships that, as the name implies, are vertical. However, there are some interesting considerations to be had for these particular types of ships. So, let's go ahead and take a look at a few examples. So we've got the Zephyr, which is a interesting design. It's more top heavy, and you'll notice obviously the top is the cockpit. A lot of people, when they do vertical ships, kind of go for a more central cockpit, like the Gola back here, which is a little drone that I made. And I'll talk about why the Gola is probably my least favorite that I've done. And then we've got the Centurion, which is kind of the old beastie, and it's asymmetrical, and there is a random lava block, but whatever, right? Who cares? Yeah. So vertical ships are tricky simply because they tend to be thinner. You can't place the core where you would in a typical other type of ship. I typically will, in a battleship type situation, I will place the core about 2/3 to 4/5 the way back on the ship, towards the back of the ship. Just, making it so you have to shoot through more to get to it. With a transport or something that I plan to have running away from combat as opposed to getting into it, I do the opposite. I have it towards the front so that there's just more distance in between, but vertical ships are very, very difficult to do that with. However, the benefits are that they tend to be very good as offensive platforms because we'll use the Gola here as an example. These two white lines are actually all guns, pretty much all the way up and down. And they can do that, and they can bring a lot of offensive weapons to bear directly on the target, on anything in front of you. You'll notice the other thing is that all these turrets are located essentially towards the front of the craft. Now, obviously, it's not a big craft, but you can put a lot of offensive power directly to the front. The trade-off is typically you won't have as much interior space to work with, so your shields are going to be less. So that's not always true, but I've found that it's true, and power systems tend to be significantly more difficult to put in. But let's talk about all the little eccentricities about how to build one of these and hopefully make it look good. Alright, so first up, we'll take a look at the Zephyr, the closest one to us. You'll notice that it's vertically asymmetrical, and that's a big thing. On any ship, you want it to be vertically asymmetrical. Simply because most things are, and it's pleasing to the eye. So you'll notice the top here is significantly different from the bottom down here, and it makes it a very, very nice shape. So that's the first rule. Make sure that your ships are vertically asymmetrical, and significantly so, more so than with a horizontal ship. Which is actually more difficult than it sounds, especially considering the space that you typically have to work with, especially if you're going for the high-speed, lean, evil, powerful, kind of sleek, deadly panther-type look. There's a lot of adjectives. Okay, I'm not going to do that many adjectives. But yeah, so you typically want to you'll notice that most of mine here have a single block like so at the very front, a single block line rather, that protrudes out the furthest, and it kind of works with all of them. The Gola is a little bit different simply because of the way I built it. Now this one does not have vertical asymmetry, and you'll notice that it doesn't look so good. It looks like a drone. It was kind of originally built to be a drone, but it looks like a drone, and not in a good way, in my opinion. The other thing is you'll notice the taper back, the taper up and back is really, it's not a clean line. It's not a perfectly clean line at a 45° or anything. And we're going to take a look here in a little bit. I'll open up Photoshop and we'll take a look at a few different pictures. And you can kind of see why that is if we look at other spacecraft models. Now, I've seen one large vertical ship that was good, and I think that was made by Cleogenes, and that's called the Longbow. I don't know if it's up for download or not. I think that was the only large vertical ship that I've ever seen that really looks good, because I don't consider Delmont's Vertius a vertical ship. It's got a vertical front end like the Hammerhead, but it doesn't have a but the rest of it is all horizontal. So I'm gonna go ahead here and delete out the Gola, and we'll take a look at the Centurion a little bit better. This one is kind of an old staple for me, and this is, you'll notice, a little thicker, but we can look at it's vertically asymmetrical. This entire bottom part is separated, and that keeps it, you know, an interesting look all the way up, because instead of looking from front to back, most people are going to be looking from bottom to top or top to bottom. So you need to keep interesting things the whole way down, and up, I guess, technically. But yeah, you can do things asymmetrically. It's a little bit tricky. Again, vertical ships are probably the things that I have the toughest time with. And speaking of which, let's go take a look at a couple of my failed designs. Alright, so we're going to do a quick flyby here. I sped up the footage as I was flying past all these. Yeah, so for every one vertical ship that I've made, there's probably a good 10 that never got finished. Some of them have cool ideas and all, but the proportions are so tricky, or can be so tricky, and it's really hard to get a good feel for a vertical ship. I think that's the biggest downside, is when you first start building a vertical ship, especially if it's your first one, or, you know, second one, or even for me, you know, third or fourth or fifth or whatever. It's hard to get a good feel for what you're trying to do. So all of these are examples of tough things, you know, that I've attempted, or tough ships for me to build. And hopefully this will kind of give you an idea of how many times I've failed, so I don't speak with perfect authority on this issue. So yeah, so just something to keep in mind when we start looking at some pictures about why, or what sort of proportions and what diagonals you're going to need. So yeah, let's go ahead and jump into that. Alright, so as you can see, we've got two vertical ships here. They're from the game Freelancer, specifically the Discovery mod pack. And I'm using them because they're relatively simple models, and you can kind of see the different lines, the general ship lines that they use a little bit easier. So we'll start on this side, and this is a bounty hunter little ship. So you'll notice it's vertically asymmetrical. That's pretty obvious right off the bat. I mean, you got this long set of intakes and the main body right here, and it kind of comes down and it comes back up. It's not the same top to bottom. And it's true of this one over here too, but this is very obviously as well not vertically asymmetrical. One of the things that I'd like to note here is this is not a clean line. This is a round line, right? It's not a straight edge or anything like that, which is very difficult to do in Starmade. I think this would be possible on a larger ship. You know, we're talking probably 200 meters to get a clean line that, yes, for lack of a better term, is believable. That you don't have to, you know, kind of play a little bit of mental gymnastics, where you can actually look at it and see a relatively clean line. Obviously, it's Starmade's a voxel game, so it's not going to be quite as easy. But again, you'll notice that this is all vertically asymmetrical, even though it's rounded. And so so that's something to keep in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is, you notice everything is being pushed forward or backward on this ship. So we got the wingy bits that flare out towards the back that draws the eye backward here. and then this entire front end pushes forward, and even though that's a blunt edge, it still pushes forward and then tapers back, and it gives the feeling of speed. And typically when I build a vertical ship, that's the feeling you want to give, right? Is that this is an agile craft. This is really, really fast, and it will screw your day up royally if you mess with it. So there you go. That's this one here covered. This one here is a little different. We've got a couple of wingy bits sticking out, but again, this is very asymmetrical, and it all flows towards the back. It almost looks like you could cut this wingy bit here off, and it would make a ship too. And actually, looking at it, you could. But you'll notice again, everything's, these are slightly swept forward, and that is a very shallow angle that they're swept forward and down at, which is why, and that tends to be the case with most vertical ships, is you need to do a very shallow angle to get enough space in the ship, unless you're going to do crazy protrusions all over the place. Or you're going to have to, make it look bulky and like a flying cinder block standing on its small end, which doesn't help anything either. So it's just, it's one of those things. I wanted to give a couple of examples of ships I've seen in other games, of vertical ships, and I would love to see somebody build one of these. But with that, let's go ahead and take a look at the Centurion and the Zephyr, and show you the different proportions involved, at least in those two ships, and hopefully that'll help you out. Alright guys, so let's take a look at the different proportions in the Centurion and the Zephyr, and you'll notice that they actually have some pretty strong similarities. So we'll start here, and as always, we'll add our little box around it. And so the different parts here can easily be divided into 3 different groups, and hopefully you'll be able to see that. There are a couple red lines there. And so you've got your bottom end, and you'll notice that each group does something. So we've got a taper at the top, taper at the bottom, and then the center part is where the bulk is. And you'll notice that it's the rule of thirds. Same rule as I've been talking about for a while. This is the rule of thirds right here. So rule of thirds seems to work, especially if you have a taper on both ends and a fat middle, if you will. And again, we're looking top down. Well, in the case of vertical ships, you're actually going to look side on. And this actually holds true if you're looking at the front too. It still follows the rule of thirds. Now side to side, this one's asymmetrical, so it's not a very good example, and I'm not going to talk specifically there, but just think of the same rules that apply with regular, horizontal ships apply with verticals. They just apply slightly differently because you're going to go side on instead. You're going to look at the longest axis. So one of the other interesting things is the Zephyr is a very different ship. You'll notice it also follows the rule of thirds, with the bulk being up here, a slight taper, and then another taper in. So it seems like to get a decent one, and I've looked at a few of Dalmont's as well, if you split it into thirds, each third is a separate component to the ship. It tends to make the ship more interesting. So we got the cockpit up here, the main bulk, and a slight taper, etc. So this one kind of tapers in there, and then it's straight, but the taper's on this side. And it tends to work a little bit better. So when you're building vertical ships, kind of think in that regard. Make at least each third do something. I haven't been able to come up with a good large vertical ship to this day, so I'm not going to speak to that, but I will attempt one soon, and hopefully it will end up working out, and I can then speak to that one. So yeah, that seems to be it. Rule of thirds for these. Wingy bits only on the bulkiest parts. Turrets seem to work just fine on them. But don't make, whatever you do, make sure that the sides are not flat. Make sure they're textured. So let's go ahead and I swear I have another picture here. Oh wait, I bet you I can just grab that one. So you'll notice all the sides have stuff protruding, or just it's textured, it's not a straight line. And that's probably going to be the biggest downfall of most people. If you make a ship with a straight line on the side, you know, just a perfectly straight bit, it's just going to look like a flying, well, instead of a flying brick, it's going to be a flying wedge, which is a little bit better, but it's still not much better. So adding in, you know, little engine pods, wingy bits, making it protrude out here and there can really, really help. I actually really like the idea of one side rounded, one side pointed. It's actually kind of cool. You know, little radar dishes and stuff like that. Definitely add those protruding parts. And what you want to do is try to get everything aiming forward. You'll notice there's like these little parts that are sticking out straight ahead. That's all. I'm doing my best to get everything that I can aiming directly forward. So we've got the radar dish, both the turrets, sweeping front to back. You know, we've got these sticking out backwards. So trying to kind of get those same horizontal lines. And it tends to make the ship look lean, mean, and ready for business. So yeah, I think that's about it here. And I hope you guys have enjoyed, and I hope this was helpful. So thanks very much for watching, and as always, we'll see you again next time.